Hello students, today's lesson is about inverse functions. So what is an inverse function? An inverse function is a function that undoes another function. So we already know about inverse operations, like the opposite of addition would be subtraction, and multiplication undoes division. But now we're learning about inverse functions that undoes a whole other function. So inverse function notation is written like this. F with a little -1 right here, x.
Please report to the auditorium at this time.
Inverse notation is written like this, with F with a little -1 like this, x. That -1 is not a power, it just means inverse. So that means inverse, it's not a power, like you can't multiply by that or anything. Now the inverse switches the domain and the range. It switches the x and the y, and when we actually get ready to do these problems, you're going to see how the inverse, in order to do it, you have to switch the x and the y. So now what does the inverse do graphically? If we're graphing and we're trying to find inverse, the inverse is just a reflection over this diagonal blue line right here, which is called the line y equals x. So the inverse is a reflection over that line. You can see the blue one down here is a reflection of this green one. And more traditionally, here's a parabola. And I've drawn again the blue line y equals x. It's a reflection over that line. Is how we get the graph of the inverse. Okay, so next, how do we find the inverse? If you're trying to find the inverse function, what you have to do is you have to replace the f of x with a y. Then you're going to switch the x and y values and solve for y. So that's what we have to do. Let's look at this example right here. The first step when you're trying to find the inverse is to replace f of x with a y. Then, after you replace f of x with y, we're going to switch the x and the y. Every place that I have y, I write x, and every place that I have x, I write y. So now, the last step is to solve for y. In order to solve for y, I'm going to start by subtracting 2 to the other side. To get rid of squared, we have to do the opposite of that. We have to take the square root. And the last step when we're solving is to add the 3 to the other side. Alright, so that means that our answer is f inverse of x is this right here. And now I can write it with my inverse sign, and this will be my answer. Alright, great. Okay, so there's one more thing that I want you to learn how to do with inverse. Sometimes in these problems they'll give you two different equations, and then they'll ask you, are these two equations inverses of each other? In order to tell if two functions are inverses, here's what you do. You take one of the functions and you plug it into the other function. Then, when you simplify that, it should cancel out to just equal x. So, we're going to plug one of the functions into the other. Here's my f of x, and I've got my g of x here. The question is, are they inverses? I'm going to take this entire function g of x and put it inside my f of x equation. Okay guys, so now I'm going to have to write this out, and it's going to look really long, but look, I'm going to take this entire blue g of x and I'm going to put it into this problem where I see the x. So inside of my f of x, I'm putting g of x in the middle. This is called a composition, and we're going to talk more about compositions later. But right now, we're going to go ahead and do it. Plug this in for x. Okay, so now I've written it, and as you can see, it looks really, I've got this whole big block in here for for my g of x that's been stuck inside the other function. All right, so now let's just simplify and see what cancels. Here I have a 7 and a 7 in the denominator. These two 7s are the first thing that cancels. What do I have left? The next thing that cancels is I have a plus 18 and a minus 18. Plus 18 minus 18 cancels. Now I have 2x over 2. Now the 2's cancel. And that is great because everything canceled out and the only thing that's left is x. Alright, so we're going to try more of these tomorrow in class where we get f of g of x, put one function inside the other, and see that everything cancels out till we just have x left. That means that the answer is yes, these are inverses. See you tomorrow.